The million-dollar question: why did this happen to me? Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about what the causes are for borderline personality disorder. Although numerous studies have been conducted on what the underlying factor is for BPD, we still aren't quite sure what the trigger is specifically. However, due to current and past research, we do have some ideas of the different things that contribute to the development of BPD. Dr. Marsha Linehan, who has done a lot of research in the area, highlights the fact that what causes borderline personality disorder is the merging of two things. Firstly being a biological vulnerability, and the second being coming from an invalidating environment. But what do biological vulnerabilities mean? Vulnerabilities refer to the susceptibility to develop mental health disorders. So for example, some individuals might be more prone to develop physical illnesses such as diabetes. So essentially, a vulnerability is something that makes us more prone to be affected by either physical illness or mental disorders. Research does in fact show that those who have a first-degree relative, so a parent or a sibling who has BPD, were 10 times more likely to have it themselves. Although this isn't bulletproof, because having a sibling who has BPD, you're also having this shared environment, so it's hard to tangle out the two, whether it's biological or environmental. Another thing to consider when talking about biological vulnerabilities is looking at the actual brain structure. Research has found that parts of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, aggression, and impulsivity are actually different in those with BPD. These parts that I'm referring to are the amygdala, which is responsible for emotions, as well as the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, which is evidently linked to BPD because you have issues with impulsivity and emotional regulation. In addition to changes to the brain structure, you also have different things such as the level of chemicals found in the brain, such as dopamine and serotonin, which are responsible in part to emotional regulation, and those are often different in those affected by BPD. Although having different hypotheses about what this specific biological vulnerability is, the leading research still isn't too sure if whether or not this is a genetic issue or maybe a neurotransmitter issue. But what they do know, regardless of what this specific biological vulnerability is that it makes individuals hyperreactive and hypersensitive. Personally, I have always been sensitive, and I remember crying all the time when I was a kid, regardless of what was going on in my environment. So if I had family issues and stuff, despite those things, I was still a very sensitive person. But the environmental piece is also another important component as to what causes BPD, and Marsha Linehan explains this concept as growing up in an invalidating environment. In an invalidating environment, you're essentially told that your expression of emotions or feelings is wrong. The invalidator may deny, ignore, deliberately misinterpret, ridicule, or just be critical of your feelings. Whatever form the invalidating takes, a child growing up in this environment learns that somehow their feelings are incorrect and perhaps even not even worth considering. As they grow up, this self-belief can even lead them to distrust their own feelings and emotions. And in the case of BPD, invalidating environment typically has to do with the family setting. This can look like parents who are hostile, dismissive, abusive, or critical, and whichever way, shape, or form it takes on, it's usually done in a chronic and consistent way. I also want to make it extremely clear that you didn't need to be abused, whether physical or verbally, by your parents to have grown up in an invalidating environment. For example, if you have a child that has this biological vulnerability and is already extremely sensitive and hyperreactive, paired with parents who maybe don't have the best insight of their own emotion and emotional needs, and who also grew up in a household that didn't value expressing your emotions or your needs, when this child is constantly crying over quote-unquote small things, the parent might just see them as being overly sensitive and dismiss how they're feeling. So this isn't done with malintention or malicious intent. It's just merely a different way that the parent has of conceptualizing the world, but this actually does create an invalidating environment for this child. Personally, I grew up in a household with a parent who loved us and did everything for us. He devoted his time and energy into being there for us and provided everything that we wanted financially. But being the sensitive kid that I was and needing perhaps additional emotional support, validation, or trust that someone did care about my emotions, paired with my dad, who maybe at the time wasn't necessarily in tune with expressing emotions or talking about things, it made it very difficult for me to feel validated, because often when I was feeling upset, those feelings were shut down, as in, I don't have time for this, or just figure it out, it'll be okay, even just a nice pat on the back, but never really allowing me to dive into how I was feeling and supporting and validating my experiences. So whenever I felt sad or anything other than normal, my feelings immediately got ignored or shut down, because there was already 2 other kids in our family who were taking up so much space, and my dad had his own things going on, that there was no space left for my emotional needs, which hurt me a lot, and still to this day obviously has effects in my life. So this biological vulnerability paired with this invalidating environment is conducive of developing borderline personality disorder later on in life. However, once again, it's important to know that it's not everyone who has an invalidating environment that develops BPD, and it's not everyone who has this biological vulnerability who does develop BPD. Obviously, if you have both, the probability does go up. However, there's no absolutes here, which can be very frustrating to some, because everyone wants a clear-cut answer as to, why do I have this disorder? Why me? Thankfully, those with BPD are not doomed, and it has been shown that those who follow the appropriate treatment plan can heal. On that topic, I'm going to be releasing a video next week that talks about the 6-month treatment plan specifically designed for people with BPD. So to make sure that you don't miss that video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Finally, if you're struggling with BPD or any of the symptoms, please find someone to talk to in your area, as this is a crucial part of the healing process. I hope you found this information helpful, and I would love to hear from you as well. What has helped you heal from your invalidating environment? Please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next week for another episode of On the Line.